I think many Americans are coming to the realization of truth. And it's simply this. Without Canada and Mexican support, the United States of America would be a third world country.
Have you guys seen this video with this realtor from Texas, a Latina for Trump, Jessica Garza, who made a video stating that if you're looking for a new home, her heart goes out to you, making the gesture. Yeah, well, you know what, Jessica Garza, my heart doesn't go out to you now that you lost your job. Fuck around, find out.
MAGA influencers and politicians are rushing to delete their tweets after they were caught lying about what was in the budget resolution passed by House Republicans last night. In Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, for example, she tweeted yesterday, "Congratulations, America. Tonight we finally put an end to tax on tips and tax on overtime." Except there was one problem. That was a complete and total lie. And so she was fact-checked by Twitter, by the community notes, people saying that no, that in fact did not include provisions for no tax on tips or no tax on overtime. Also, that wasn't even the full bill. Nothing actually passed. It was just a resolution putting forth targets of what they ultimately wanted. And that tweet has now been deleted. MAGA influencer account End Wokeness got caught in the same exact lie, writing, "Breaking House GOP passes budget bill, which ends taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security. Promises made, promises kept." And that was deleted as well. But not before it racked up over 6 million views. So MAGA was trying to position this resolution, which is going to try to push forward more than $4.5 trillion in tax cuts for the wealthy and adding $19 trillion to the deficit over 10 years as some sort of bill for the common man. Well, they got caught. And some of these accounts that lied about it still have these tweets up to this second. They are quite literally scamming their own base, yet their base doesn't seem to realize it or doesn't care. We're going to be following everything that's going on, so make sure you follow our account for more and add the Midas Touch podcast on Apple and Spotify to stay up to date.
Did you guys see this today? Elon Musk said that the United States of America will go bankrupt unless Doge goes through and continues cutting federal programs. Now, what Elon Musk doesn't want you to know is that when they're cutting programs like Medicaid, which provides health care to millions of Americans in this country, as well as SNAPs, which provides food stamps to millions of Americans in this country, they will not be saving this country from bankruptcy. They just want to make sure that they cut enough corners and they slash enough federal programs that help Americans in order to pay for the Trump tax cut extensions, which are only going to seriously help wealthy Americans. The biggest irony of all is that Trump, during his first term, added more to the national debt than any president in U.S. history, over twice what the Biden administration added, and Trump's plan will continue to put the United States in debt, all to pay for his tax cuts, which is why they are desperately struggling to find other cash by cutting things that actually help Americans like Medicaid and SNAPs.
How does a dictator rise to power? It doesn't just happen overnight. It happens slowly, day by day, bit by bit, until one day you wake up and you don't even recognize your own country. And the scariest part, we're watching it play out in real time. Yes, I realize an oligarchy is at play, but hear me out. There are 6 steps to becoming a dictator. Step 1, manufacture a crisis, then pretend to be the only one who can fix it. No dictator starts by demanding absolute power. They start by convincing people that everything is falling apart. And who do we know that does that? Trump. America's in chaos. The border's out of control. The election was stolen. Every time, it's the same script. He was even gearing up to say that this election was stolen if he wouldn't have won it. He makes people feel like they're under attack. And then like clockwork, he says, only I can fix it. This is step 1. Break the system just enough so people beg you to fix it. Step 2, control the story. Because if you control the truth, you control the people. A dictator can't have people thinking for themselves. So they make sure that what people hear, see, and believe goes through them first. Trump, he declared war on the press. If the media says anything he doesn't like, fake news, enemy of the people. He brainwashed his base into believing that the truth is whatever he says it is. Step 2 is when people only hear your version of events, they stop questioning it. Step 3, pick a scapegoat, because a distracted public is one that's easy to control. A dictator always needs an enemy. Like a superhero always needs a villain, same concept. Because if people are focused on hating someone else, they're not looking at who actually holds the power. With Trump, it's immigrants, Black Lives Matter, the LGBTQIA plus community, China, the deep state. Pick a day. He's got someone new to blame. Step 3 is get people busy fighting each other so they never fight you. Step 4 is undermine the system from the inside so no one can stop you. Here's the thing. Most dictators don't start with a coup. They get elected, and then they slowly start rigging the game in their favor. And Trump, he's stacking every position that he can with loyalists and purging anyone in the government that won't bend a knee. Step 4 is when the rules don't apply to you, you win every time. Step 5, use fear to stay in power because nobody questions what they're afraid to speak about. You ever wonder why nobody stands up to people like this? Because they make it dangerous to do so. Trump, if you cross him, he's going to have his supporters attack you, harass you, and probably try to ruin your career. Step 5 is make people too afraid to fight back. Step 6, make people worship you. The final step is to convince the people that you're not just powerful, you're godlike. And Trump, his supporters don't just like him, they treat him like a prophet. He literally said, I could pew-pew somebody on Fifth Avenue and not lose voters. And guess what? He was right. 34 accounts later. Dictators don't always come in military uniforms. Sometimes they come in suits and Twitter memes. Sometimes they buy their own media empire. Sometimes they convince you that they're the only ones that can save you. But ask yourself, are they actually saving you? Or are they saving themselves? Because history shows us one thing. People like this don't stop until there's nothing left to take.
So I'm hearing from quite a few of you that you've been calling your Republican House representatives today to yell at them about their votes last night, as you should, but that the staffers have been pushing back, and it almost seems that they have been told to respond in a certain way, which is to say, there's nowhere in that budget resolution that says that Republicans are going to cut Medicaid. You've got bad information. Now, we're going to set aside for a second the fact that staffers are not supposed to argue with you when you call, and I'm just going to tell you exactly what you should say in response, because knowingly or not, these staffers are lying to you. They are gaslighting you, and it's not cool. But before I do that, I want to explain to you very, very quickly, because it's relevant to your response, what exactly a budget resolution is, because it's not the final bill. The budget resolution is sort of the recipe that comes before it. It's a blueprint, if you will. That's what Republicans passed last night, and this blueprint is vague in some ways and specific in others. Let's go back to our recipe analogy for 1 second, because it might make it a little more clear. Say you're baking a pie, and someone tells you, okay, you're going to bake a pie, and in the middle of the pie, you're going to need 2 cups of something, and it has to be a fruit. So they're not telling you what fruit to put in, but they are saying it's got to be 2 cups, and it's got to be a fruit. Think of the budget resolution a little bit that way. The budget resolution spells out 2 things: the amounts that they want cut and from which committees exactly. And each of those committees, remember, oversees very specific departments. Here is where we get into the trick that Republicans are trying to play. The resolution basically says for every committee, we need it to be 2 cups and we need it to be a fruit, but it doesn't spell out which fruit it is. That part comes later. So what Republicans' tactic today seems to be is to tell people, well, we never said anything about apples, we just said fruit, but we can easily infer what fruit it is. For example, the budget resolution mandates $880 billion in cuts under the Energy and Commerce Committee. Energy and Commerce, it's 2 huge ticket items, Medicare and Medicaid. Covers a couple of other small things, but there's literally no way that you get anywhere close to $880 billion without cutting massively into Medicare or Medicaid. Now, for whatever it's worth, Trump has promised up and down to not touch Medicare, and that means Medicaid is the only thing they can cut. Similarly, they haven't come out and had to say we're going to cut supplemental nutritional assistance program, but this budget resolution has instructed Republicans on the Agriculture Committee to cut at least $230 billion. They have to. And the one thing in there that everybody knows Republicans are dying to cut is SNAP. So they don't have to say the words yet, and in fact, this budget resolution doesn't require them to say any kinds of words like that. It just gives them amounts and tells them which committees need to go and find those amounts to cut. And here's the thing, those amounts are binding. So if the Energy and Commerce Committee, for example, cannot find $880 billion worth of cuts, the entire package falls apart. They all need to stick to those numbers, which means that they are absolutely going to cut Medicaid, Medicare, or some combination thereof. Now, I want to be very clear that this has not happened yet, and it's not a foregone conclusion, because the Senate also has to agree to this, and they all have to get on the same page. And right now, the Senate is in a very different place. So we can still stop this, but don't let House Republicans tell you that it's not what they want to do, because it is exactly what they want to do. This leads me to your answer. When you talk to the staffer, and the staffer says, well, there's nowhere in this budget that it talks about cutting Medicaid, you're being fed lies by Democrats. What you can say in response is, okay, then I have a question for you and I'd like my answer in writing. Where will Republicans get the $880 billion that they are now mandated to cut under the Energy and Commerce Committee, if not from Medicaid? The staffer will say, okay, someone will get back to you, but they can't. There's nowhere else for them to get that money. Republicans are going to lie about what they're doing because it's unpopular and hateful, greedy and cruel, and because the only reason they want to do it is to cut taxes for the very richest people in this country, the 0.1% richest people. Don't let them gaslight you. Don't let them lie to you. Know your facts before you get in. And the facts are they're coming for Medicaid. Don't let them off the hook. Thanks.
Republicans, you need to hear this. Please hear this. I was a Republican my whole life. I live in a world full of Republicans, my family, my friends. But does it not concern you that when Republican politicians today are asked about the lies, the undisputable lies from Donald Trump, their response now, to avoid acknowledging the lies, is to say, well, Donald Trump is saying what Americans are feeling. It's not the Republican Party I thought I was a part of years ago. I refuse to be defined by a party who appeals to the masses by lying to them. Keep an eye on what he does with the press right now. Watch what he does with the press and the judiciary, the last lines of defense.
You ever listen to these MAGAs and just think, oh my God, how can a person be this stupid? I was just watching a video of a MAGA mom. She was at a restaurant and she was being asked, what's so great about Donald Trump? Why did you vote for Donald Trump? How is Donald Trump going to be so good for America? And she says, and I wrote it down, she said, you're not going to have to pay property taxes anymore. You're not going to have to pay income taxes anymore, thanks to Donald Trump. You'll have a lot more money in your pocket. And then she couldn't remember the rest of the details. Gee, shocker. God, is she real? And this was again, she's a MAGA mom. All right. I don't want to guess her age, but she wasn't a young woman. She's lived in the world for a while. How is it that she's this stupid? You're not going to have to pay property taxes anymore because of Donald Trump. Property taxes are local taxes, dumbass. How do you think that Donald Trump is going to eliminate your property taxes? And how do you think he's going to eliminate income taxes? Yes, you pay income taxes to the federal government, but how do you think the federal government gets money? If none of us pay income taxes anymore, how are we going to fund the government? This ultimately is why we're so screwed as a country, because there's literally tens of millions of people in this country who are every bit as stupid as this MAGA mom. We're so screwed.
It's time to speak up. Did you guys see what came out of the House today as their proposed budget that they've approved? 99% of Republicans voted that there be a $1.5 trillion reduction in essential services, the vast majority of that coming from Medicaid. Do you know what Medicaid is most used for? Do you know what percentage of elderly people in nursing homes right now pay for their housing and their medicine and their care through Medicaid? 62%. 62% of the elderly people who live in nursing homes are there funded by Medicaid. Do you know how many disabled Americans use Medicaid to survive? Disabled Americans. There are more than 10 million non-elderly disabled Americans who rely on Medicaid. And $880 billion was cut from that budget. You want to know what else is in that budget? A $4.5 trillion tax cut over the next 10 years for the wealthiest 1%, and another $800 billion to corporations. They literally cut our elderly and our disabled's lifelines to give the rich more. How much is enough? How many billions is enough? We're going to need to go love our neighbor with our actions because they're going to need it. The elderly and the disabled are going to need us to go out there and live what we say. Go love your neighbor.
If you support the president, then you should know it's evident that you are in a cult, can't seem to comprehend the relevance of independent thinking. I'm the crisis that it's bringing, prices raising, people raging, and our country's on the brink of authoritarian dictatorship. I am fucking scared of it, and you should be scared too, but you refuse to see the truth. You refuse to see the people. Different from you is your equal. That the government is playing us, and this is all a sequel to the horrors that they taught us in the books they're trying to toss out. It's a crook we put in power, and he's throwing all the laws out. Think about your sons and daughters. Think of everything we fought for. Think about freedom of speech. Think about the morals you preach. Cause to me they don't align. You keep proving that there's hatred. There's a lack of understanding in the heart that you call sacred. Every immigrant deported is a child of your Lord. Think of Jesus seeking shelter. Would you kick him out as well? Would you ask him for his papers? Call him a criminal and rapist for being born on different land? Will you ever take a stand? I mean, please, let's reevaluate these horrible demands. Where's the love? Where's the reason? What's going on? This fucking treason.
So we get that we're demanding, like, everything, right? If they're going to make us strike, and they are, if they're going to make us go through this bullshit, and they are, then we're going for all of it. We're not going back to a time where we were all barely scraping by. We're going for all of it. I am talking universal health care that includes our eyes and teeth. We're going to raise the federal minimum wage to something acceptable. We're going to wipe out student loan debt and make college fucking affordable. We're going to fund the Department of Education to make sure every child, no matter their ability, gets the assistance they require to learn what they need to learn to do the best they can in life. We're going to make it simpler and cheaper and easier to become a citizen. Net fucking neutrality. Pensions, motherfucker. No more forced arbitration clauses in terms of service. Unions and labor rights. Hello. I'd like my privacy back, thank you. It goes without saying that Roe v. Wade will be codified and enshrined into law. Oh yeah, we're ending Citizens United. Fuck you, Hobby Lobby. I want better things for our disabled people. Do you know how little money they get to live on? And how little they're allowed to save before they get kicked out of the program? It's nothing. It is nothing. They deserve so much better. I would like to legalize cannabis. Progressive taxes. Billionaires are gonna fucking hate it. Public transportation, anyone? And how about actually fixing our infrastructure so our bridges quit falling and people like Flint have clean water? They still don't have clean water. And how about affordable housing? Or banning all these giant corporations from buying up all the fucking homes? How about national rent control? Oh, term limits for Congress people. A ban on Congress people trading stocks. No more lobbying. No more lobbying, no more money. Money out of fucking politics. Money out of goddamn politics. It's bullshit. Term limits for the Supreme Court, as well as clear-cut repercussions when they break the fucking law or the rules. Oh, and presidential immunity? No. So yeah, there's like a lot going on to be a little afraid of right now, but there is also a lot to be fucking hopeful for, because if they are going to make us go through all this shit anyway, and they are, we're going to strike back. We're going to do a general strike. We're going to fucking win. And then we're going to get the entire wish list of shit we have wanted for decades. They thought they were going to drag us back to the 1920s. Instead, I say, let's do something that will propel us forward into something that makes sense in the 21st goddamn century. While we're at it, let's talk universal basic income, because automation is going to be a thing. There are simply going to be more robots doing more jobs, which means less people need to be doing those jobs. But those people still deserve to live well. Universal basic income, baby. Here we come. Fear is paralyzing. Hope is energizing. And there is so much to hope for, even in all this craziness, because we can pull it out. Again, we only need 3.5% of the population to engage in a sustained general strike. That's only 11 to 12 million people in the U.S. There are 340 million of us. I guarantee you 11 million of us can do this. Are you going to be one of them? GeneralStrikeUS.com. Check it out. Sign up. The sooner we get this rolling, the sooner we can make things better.
And here we go. Absolutely random, but also completely as expected, Donald Trump declares that he is slapping 25% tariffs on the EU. And he also throws in for good measure that the EU was founded in order to screw over America. This is so nuts that I have to break it down into two parts. One, about the tariffs themselves and why that's really foolish on his part. But then two, the foundation of the EU and what it was all about, which is something that I know intimately as the chair of European Movement UK, that was founded in 1949 and European Movement was founded in 1948. I know the whole history. So let's go on the tariffs themselves. What a weird thing to do just after you have hosted Emmanuel Macron and you've got Keir Starmer visiting you to say that you're suddenly going to punish Europe and with a hefty set of tariffs. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, he is so random that this was expected, and he also flagged up that this is something that he might do months ago. So, of course, the EU is thoroughly well prepared for this. And the EU has seen trade attacks from the States before, because this is something Trump did last time, and this is something that George W. Bush did back in 2001, 2002 with their steel tariffs. So the EU knows exactly how to reply because they have won these battles before, and America's going to get hurt. But what a brilliant opportunity now to screw Elon Musk. So let's jump back quickly to the 2001 and 2002 trade war between the States and the EU. And that is that when George W. Bush decided ill-advisedly to put steel tariffs universally around the world, it hurt the EU, which included Britain at the time. Tony Blair, his bestest buddy, couldn't convince him otherwise. So the EU said, we don't like this. We are going to put revenge tariffs on you, but politically targeted to bourbon whiskey coming out of Kentucky, which we know you've got close friends there, Michigan car manufacturing, Harley Davidson manufacturer. I think that was in Wisconsin. But most importantly, Florida oranges, because in Florida, it was George W. Bush's brother, Jeb Bush. He was governor there, and he was in by a whisker, and it was coming up to another electoral test. And basically, George W. Bush backed down. So from that moment, the EU knew the formula on how to attack America when America gets protectionist. You go for the people nearest and dearest to the president themselves, and you target their states, and you target the core industries of their states. And that's what the EU did again when Trump came into power and decided to start throwing around tariffs onto China and onto the EU. But this time, Donald Trump, because he's causing so much internal chaos within his country, as well as trying to take on Canada and Mexico and China and now Europe with tariffs, he is just going to get himself hurt, and he's going to get pushback within his country. He's already taking on the Wall Street Journal with his notions of laying on tariffs. But the sweet, sweet opportunity now arises to go straight for Donald Trump's best buddy, Elon Musk. Because if people throw tariffs at you, you have to respond in kind. Europe has discovered that the political stuff works, and so X is up for punishment, and so is Tesla, and so is Starlink. And you can just go for those hard right across Europe, which, alongside the US and China, these are the three big markets of the world right now. Europe can go hard, but can make it extremely targeted on the pinch points in the States right now. And that's what they're going to do, and they've had time to prepare it. So Donald Trump is being extremely silly with this move at a time when he really should be working with the EU, but he's decided to be making them enemies. So Agent Krasnov, Agent Orange, is just following a weird script. Now, talking about this weird script, let's talk about the origin of the EU, because it really started in 1947, 1948, when there were lots of pro-Europe cohesion movements bubbling away. And Winston Churchill was one of the cheerleaders, and he gave this great speech in Zurich about a sort of United States of Europe in order to bring everyone together. And he and mainly French and Belgian counterparts formed the European movement in 1948. Which is 77 years ago now? Yep. And that was all about political cohesion, market cohesion, and even floating the ideas of the European army. 1 year later, basically that team of people put together the European Charter on Human Rights, which included the European Court, United Nations were trying to do the same thing. America was the one that screwed that over, by the way. So Europe actually got more advanced on all the cohesion stuff, guaranteeing fundamental rights. But the basic of it all was peace between nations and guarantees of human rights and citizen rights in all participating countries. And that just grew and grew. And in the 1950s, it was Germany and France that said, right, the first move here is to just jointly share our coal and our steel production so that we can never go to war, because the fundamentals of building the war machines, the coal and the steel, are jointly owned. So you can't separate that and get two armies against each other. So that coal and steel union then expanded to include other parts of market, and it built into a whole set of different communities, from, you know, the atomic research and stuff, to be the whole European communities, called EC for short. And then that later developed into a single market and a whole European Union. But the cohesion was always economic and political, with the fundamental principle about guaranteeing the peace and human rights and fundamental rights for all within it. And then on top of that was just the market cohesion in order to have size and bring down barriers. And to a degree, it was inspired by the US and the United States and bringing together such, a large population and building such a large market. But this isn't something that was rivaling the United States, because the United States was encouraging it and encouraging its expansion actively. You know, from the initial days of kind of like the Marshall Plan, reinvesting in the health and the stability of Europe, to actively investing in the EU's expansion eastwards in order to take on these new countries that wanted democracy and stability and human rights, and to be part of a market with mechanisms against corruption, all that kind of stuff. The US and the EU have been partners on that idea of stability. So for Donald Trump to say that the EU was set up in order to screw over the US, rather than in admiration of the US and in partnership with the US, with a shared notion of global order around, rule of law, yada, yada, is just batshit crazy. Probably comes from either the Russians or other malign influence. But the fact that he would go and say it without checking it when the history is so well documented is just another reason why Europe at the moment should cut itself away from America wherever possible and be that strong entity in itself that can protect Ukraine and that can protect the global order in terms of justice, the International Criminal Court, World Health Organizations, United Nations, and all those kind of structures that also help out the global south and all of those developing countries that just need a solid system to work with. So, yep, Donald Trump being crazy again, but getting himself into the stupid box again and making better arguments yet again for him just being isolated from anything that is sensible.